Welcome to my entry-level wood shop. Today, I'm going to show you how you can build top quality furniture and other woodworking projects with very limited space and on a low budget. Now, like most of you, I don't have access to a huge wood shop or thousands of dollars of tools. I work in my garage. I only have about $1,000 in tools, and I've still been able to build large shelves, nightstands, changing table for my first kid, and even a travel trailer. Let's talk about the tools you're going to need to get started and how I make the most of the limited space I have. Now, the first tool you're going to want to get is the table saw. You can find these on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist for $50 to $100 all the time. I bought this one for $50. It had a bad switch in it. Ordered a new one on Amazon 2 days later, showed up, swapped it out. It's run beautifully ever since. I've had it for about 2 years. It's been the powerhouse of my whole table. A table saw is going to allow you to make cross cuts and rip cuts, which account for most of the cuts you're going to be making on boards. For your table saw, I'm going to make 2 recommendations on accessories. The first is going to be to attach a dust collection blade guard. Now, I see a lot of people using their table saws with no blade guard. And that's okay if that's what you want to do. It's not the safest way to operate, but sometimes that's the only way you can make the cuts you need to make. This guard is big, it's bulky, it can be in the way. But when it comes to safety, there's nothing that's going to beat it. And being able to hook up to my dust collector makes this one of my favorite accessories. Now, your table saw is going to probably come with a fence. If you buy it used, it might not. Most job site saws, like I have, on the cheaper end, only come with a very short fence. And this is alright if you're doing job site style work. But if you're doing fine woodworking, a short fence just ain't going to cut it. Now what I did is I took a piece of nice, straight, finished wood and I bolted it to my fence. This extended the length of the fence by about double. This allows me to push boards far beyond the extent of the normal fence and keep them nice and snug to this to make sure I'm getting a great, clean, straight cut with a table saw. The second tool you're going to want is a chop saw. This is one of the few tools I bought brand new and name brand. This saw I bought on sale, ran me about $250. But it was a great deal for the time when I bought it, and it made a lot of the cuts that I would have done on my table saw a little bit faster and easier to do. Make sure to check on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist. You can find these chop saw or miter saws for pretty cheap, way below what you're going to pay for retail value. Now that you have a table saw and a miter saw, the next tool you're going to want to get is a planer. Especially early on, a lot of the wood you're going to work with is not going to be a uniform thickness. You're going to go to Lowe's, Home Depot, your local store, and you're going to buy the cheapest wood they have because that's what you can afford. A lot of times it's going to be fence pickets or cold lumber, and those can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Having a planer on hand will allow you to take those warped boards, those crooked boards, those boards with uneven thicknesses, and plane them down to a nice even thickness, making them usable for all of your projects. I purchased this planer for about $200 from Lowe's, brand new. I've had it for a couple of years, put it through a lot of work, haven't had any issues, no breakdowns, nothing. It's not the most expensive planer out there, it's not the best style, but sometimes when you're just getting started, having a cheaper or not name brand tool is going to be the best route, so you're going to be able to do the work you need to do on a smaller budget. Now, one of the biggest dangers in a small wood shop like this is an unseen one, and that is dust. Because of that, the next tool I'd recommend is a dust collector. I have mine mounted underneath my workbench with hoses running throughout the workbench so that I can connect it to my table saw, my planer, my miter saw, my sanders, and any other tool I may need to connect it to that makes a lot of dust, a lot of wood chips. Another option, if you don't want to invest in a dust collector, is just to get a respirator. Now, there are dust masks and there are dust respirators. A dust mask is kind of just a gimmick. It doesn't really do anything to protect you. If you do your research on it, a mask and a respirator, not the same thing. A mask is meant to contain particles coming from your mouth to your environment. A respirator does the opposite. It's meant to filter out the particles coming from your environment into your mouth. I purchased my respirator for about $15 on Amazon. If you go to any of the big box stores, Lowe's, Home Depot, most of the respirators they sell there are $40, $50. If that's in your budget, go ahead and pick one up. If you have a few days to wait though, order one on Amazon and you can take those savings and put it towards other tools for your wood shop. My dust collector is made by Win and it cost me about $150. Alright, the next tool is going to be a palm or orbital sander. You can find these in all sorts of price ranges. Brand new, this Bauer brand from Harbor Freight is only about $40. On a small budget, an orbital sander like this is all you're going to need. You can also take the sandpaper from these, wrap it around pieces of wood to make hand sanding blocks to get in the tight spaces that something like this might not be able to get into. Next up on our list is going to be a router. Now, this router I bought from Lowe's, brand new, cost about $100, but it came with the router, the fixed base, and also a plunge base. Skill also has a router table that you can purchase alongside these for about $100, $150. I don't personally have it, but it's something I would like to get in the future to make routering little parts just that much easier. A router is going to let you cut grooves and channels, round over edges, cut tongue and groove joints, and add fancy and intricate edges to all of your projects. The next tool you're going to want to buy, and you're going to want to buy many, are clamps. There are many different styles of clamps and length of clamps, but you're going to want to buy an assortment. You're going to want longer ones, you're going to want shorter ones, you're going to want all types. I have a running joke with my wife that I always need more clamps. You are going to use these on almost every single project you work on, even if you don't think you will. You're going to use them for glue ups. You're going to use them for holding projects together while you put in screws or nails. You're going to use them to hold things together while you repair damage or mistakes that you may have made. All in all, I figured about $100 out of your $1,000 budget should be in just clamps. I purchased many of mine from Harbor Freight, where you can get clamps for much, much cheaper than you can from the big box stores. The quality of these clamps isn't always as good as the big box store clamps or the name brand clamps, but when you're just getting started in a wood shop, you need clamps and you have a budget. So being able to buy more clamps on the same budget is going to go further than buying fewer clamps but better quality clamps and not having enough for the projects when you need them. The last power tool I'm going to recommend for now is a drill or impact driver. Mine is name brand DeWalt, but I got it used from a pawn shop, I think for about $60. You're probably going to spend $60 to $100 buying one of these brand new. Oftentimes they do not come with batteries, and the batteries are the most expensive part, sometimes being $200, $300 for just one battery. If you don't want to spend that much, check your local pawn shops, Facebook Marketplace, or Craigslist. You can find all sorts of brands for much, much cheaper. You can find battery packs. You can find the whole works without breaking your budget. Last but not least, you're going to want a hammer, a measuring tape, and a square. These are pretty general tools that most people are already going to have around their shop. But make sure to get a measuring tape and a square that have as fine of markings as possible, so that when you're marking with your pencil, it is as exact and precise as you can be. When you're making fine woodworking projects, it is imperative to use as small of a pencil as you can find, and make sure that your measuring tape and your square measure correctly with each other. You're going to want to make sure that they line up and that 1 inch on one is the same as 1 inch on the other. Adding up all the tools I just showed you, I spent about $1,010 for all of it. Now let's see how I make use of all these tools in the space I have in my wood shop. Besides all my tools, the most important feature in my wood shop is the workbench. I designed my workbench to incorporate my table saw and my miter saw. I arranged my saws so that I could use the length of the table as either an in-feed or out-feed for the saws. This maximizes the use of the workbench while minimizing the space required to have multiple tools in such a small area. Underneath my table saw, I have another cubby that houses my dust collector. The pipe from my dust collector then comes back up through the bottom of the workbench and runs to the middle of it, where I have a hose connected that I then connect to either my table saw, my miter saw, or I run down to the end where I have my planer set up. Underneath the top of my workbench, there's a shelf that holds my sander, scrap pieces of wood, and some of the jigs I make when woodworking. I use the pegboard behind me to organize all my other tools. Now, I've been adding some additional tools, besides the ones mentioned in this video, to my wood shop over the last couple of years. These tools, however, are not required for just getting started in woodworking. On the bottom half of my workbench, I built a wood kiln. Now, the reason I built this is that when I first got started in woodworking, and even to this day, I like to build stuff with the cheapest lumber possible. And that usually comes from Lowe's or Home Depot in the form of fence pickets. Fence pickets almost always come with 20% or more moisture content. If you buy this lumber, bring it home, and build a project with it straight away, it'll look great at first. But 3 or 4 weeks down the road, the boards will have shrunk as they lose their moisture content, making gaps, cracks, even breaking the project sometimes. I built this kiln so I could bring home wet lumber and put it straight in, along with my dehumidifier, and then over a week or two, all that extra moisture gets pulled out of the wood, and the boards come out completely dry. I can then safely build with these boards without worrying about my projects cracking, shrinking, or warping. Now, apart from the insulation in the wood kiln, the entire workbench was built with cold lumber, which is usually 50 to 70% off, depending which store you might purchase it from. Cold lumber comes sometimes with small cracks, a chip here or there, maybe it's a little warped, but if you're persistent and are willing to put up with a little bit of a challenge sometimes to get things to work, it'll save you a whole lot of money when putting something together. Thank you so much for joining me and allowing me to share my tips and tricks on how to get a wood shop set up on a budget and in a tight space. If you have any questions or would like anything explained further, please leave a comment down below. Enjoy your woodworking and stay safe.